Senators, when the Senate last rose, the question before you was that it resolved that the Parliament of St. Lucia acknowledges receipt of the report of St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project Review Committee, hereinafter referred to as the Review Committee, and expresses its profound thanks and gratitude to the members of the Review Committee for their sterling contribution, diligence, and selfless dedication in completing the report. 2, that the Parliament of St. Lucia do advise the Cabinet of Ministers to consider and approve the recommendations presented by the Review Committee for the completion and commissioning of the St. Jude Hospital to facilitate the move and transfer of operations from the George Odlum National Stadium to the original St. Jude Hospital site. 3, that the Parliament of St. Lucia do advise the Cabinet of Ministers to explore other sustainable health opportunities for the St. Jude Hospital site. And 4, that the Parliament of St. Lucia, cognizant of the distressing conditions of the St. Jude Hospital at the George Odlum National Stadium, further expresses its profound gratitude to the doctors, nurses, staff, and patients for their contribution, dedication, patience, and commitment over the years. Senator Antoine.
Madam President, I beg leave to join fellow senators in wishing you and other senators a very productive 2023. I hope that everybody will enjoy the best of health so that they can be as productive as possible. I also wish to welcome Senator Silas Wilson to today's debate. I know we wait for the best to come last today. I know he will give a good account of himself. I also wish to express condolences to Senator Jean on the passing of her father. I hope that God continues to guide and bless her. Condolences to the family of Miss Seferina, who met her demise through tragic circumstances. I hope they can find solace. I also wish to extend condolences to the many families from Choiseul Saltibus who have recently lost loved ones. In particular, the family of Mr. Norbert Alexander, who was buried, my former neighbor who was buried this week, and to Chanel and her family from Delsey on the untimely passing of their mother. Madam President, the leader of government business has established a roadmap to where we are today regarding the reconstruction of the St. Jude Hospital. Madam President, I have no intentions of dissecting the various reports, information and misinformation floating around. I think everybody here has given an account. We heard in the lower house earlier this week as well. Madam President, my sincere desire is to focus on the core issue surrounding what was suspected to be a capital project, but has now apparently become a recurring expenditure on the public purse. Madam President, furthermore, this constant saga, which started in 2009, must come to an end under the capable leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre, who is committed, together with all my cabinet colleagues, to realize this goal in the shortest possible time, certainly before the bell is rung. Madam President, the focal point of any debate on St. Jude Hospital should be to relieve the public who access medical services and the doctors, nurses, and other staff at the George Odlum Stadium of the deplorable condition and unfit, depressing environment within which they operate. Madam President, patients and medical workers need an ambience that is uplifting, an environment that nourishes the spirit. Nothing should be more important and urgent than this, Madam President. The people of the southern part of the island, including the people of Choiseul, Saltibus, Pi, Labrie, Vieux-Fort, and others, deserve no less, Madam President. And they are not asking for much. They are asking for an environment within which doctors, nurses, staff are able to discharge their services unhindered, unconstrained, and in comfort. Madam President, ça nous a déjà dit c'est ça. Jean sous pays Saint-Lucie, pas qu'à demander pour Dieu. Yo vle en l'hôpital côté yo confortable. En l'hôpital côté là ou ka senti malade. Ou ka vinn pli meilleur. Pas en l'hôpital là pas en côté là ou senti malade. Ou ka senti c'est mort ka vinn pli mauvais. A non-demanding public was simply asking that the government provided a health facility that facilitates their speedy recovery, stress-free. In fact, that enhances their chances of recovery, not one that is conducive to prolonging illness or, God forbid, Madam President, accelerating their demise. Madam President, I hear some speak of a state-of-the-art modern hospital. But while the people from the south are suffering, some of them traveled as far as India to get the best medical care because they could afford it, while the poor people of St. Lucia continue to endure deplorable conditions. The horses enjoyed air-conditioned comfort, while ordinary citizens fought mosquitoes and flies in their wards. Madam President, this government will put the people first and complete this hospital as soon as possible. When we speak, Madam President, we have to remember that not everybody is just as fortunate. Not everybody has the money to travel far and wide for medical care. And when we are thinking big, we have to remember we have many more smaller people in St. Lucia than big ones. So when we are planning for the big, we must remember the unfortunate people who have to suffer. Madam President, let the chips fall where they may. There may be other factors, but clearly, poor project management appears to have failed the project, the people, and the government of St. Lucia. And when I sit over here and listen to people who had all the plans and they had the budget and everything, I ask the question, where is the accountability? Why did the plan, the budget, and everything else fail? And today, we still do not have a hospital. Madam President, the wastage is more profound than the direct expenditure of 98 million spent on the original buildings and 118 million on the box. Madam President, the guy's actions of demolishing buildings and constructing a new facility instead of taking the advice of their audit, the FDL consultants, to salvage the old buildings and convert it into a facility that can adequately serve St. Lucia. But what did they do instead? They have spent $118 million and counting on a box, because we still do not have a hospital, and we still have to pay more than 28 million in payables. Madam President, to compound the wastage was the collection of materials. There are contractors who had bought equipment and materials for St. Jude, and they had provided safe spaces for them. But this guy took the SSU, went around, collected them, and dumped them on the site. Madam President, the unsuitable conditions under which these materials were stored contributed to some of them walking away. I don't know if they run too. Deterioration of others, rendering them non-functional. Exposure to heat, to humidity, and to itchy hands, Madam President. And you may not know, but during COVID, when COVID came upon us, Madam President, there was critical equipment that was supposed to have been stored, such as ventilators. And we needed them at the time. But you know what happened, Madam President? They were not stored properly, and they were found to be non-functional. Wastage, Madam President. Where is the accountability? Millions of dollars of power cables were left to the external elements, Madam President. These, I am told, can no longer be used. Wastage again, Madam President. Where is the accountability? The East Wing and surgical buildings were left unattended and unprotected, even when they were used as storage. And you know what happens when buildings are left unattended? They deteriorate, Madam President. We are all aware of the informal market for copper. How much of these cables, Madam President, went walking? Wastage again. Madam President, even the chiller plant for the air conditioning of the hospital has been cannibalized for parts, Madam President. Wastage again. So I don't even believe that we have started counting our losses, the hemorrhaging to the taxpayers, Madam President. So many drawings, so many changes. People didn't know what they were about. And they come here today and play, you know, as if they are professionals, and they planned and they did this and they did that. And this government doesn't know what it's about. But we need them to account. Madam President, Senator Fede spoke to expert advice, but didn't take their own advice from their report. He speaks of world-class hospital when his government only produced a box, and the residents of the South are still waiting. This government, Madam President, will give the people a decent hospital that meets required standards. Wastage, Madam President. Where has the money gone? Up to the time of the audit, et moi vle tout jan set lisitan sa. Peut-être ou pate bien tani en lower house, and I faut tani hodia. Nous dépenser un chay l'argent pour équipement médical, pour furniture, pour bagay. Et juste toujours qu'on dit si kouye, nous poko wey. 4 millions 970 $1,000 et chèque pour équipement by l'hôpital là. Nous poko wey ça. L'année l'autre 2 millions 51 000 chèques pour bagay radiology pour l'hôpital là. Juste toujours, ça pas encore arrivé. Madame Président, pour furniture, pour chaises, pour bagay qu'on a, pour medical gas lines, bagay pour ces call rooms, ces nos là. Pays a dépensé 6 millions et chèques, presque 7 millions de dollars. Et nous pouvons recevoir furniture ça. Madame Président, la tenue l'autre 3 millions 770 000 pour acheter la porte et bagay qu'on a pour l'hôpital là. Nous pouvons joindre yon la porte toujours. L'année l'autre femme yo payé 811 $1,000 pour petit. Et puis on teasing primaire nous joindre. Nous pas encore petit a style côté Ikea. Madame Président, ça sont chay l'argent. Nous passons à afford pour tout l'argent ça là aller comme ça et nous pas savent côté ces bagailles là l'argent supposé payer on moun kay pour dire nous on l'autre place nous te paye 14 000 $ pour mettre railing travail là pour fait mais moun en jadro. Madam President, where is the accountability for the people who are jumping high, jumping low on the other side and saying that this government doesn't know how much it will cost to build a hospital? They have all sorts of big ideas and nothing to show. Madam President, they try to hide the facts. I am sure, Madam President, you'll remember that the opposition had asked for a visit to the St. Jude's site, and the opposition was refused the opportunity. Opposition, yo pas quitter opposition vinn wè St. Jude pièce, puisque yo savait que a menti bay se moun. Ouais là on bonbon qui brûle et comme ici en ligne. Mais ça pas une pièce bonbon. Yo prend pan et yo couvert pan et belle couleur et fait moun question l'hôpital. State of the art hospital. Comme ça si opposition te vini aller, yo te ka la pan l'hôpital. Mais bon Dieu couché mais il pas dormi. Un jour misi l'applicateur obéissant mon travail était là. Et qui prend portrait en dit dans boîte là. Que de l'eau ka monter descendre, de l'eau ka fait ça puis ça pas nan rien ça c'est de l'eau tout seul ka passade. C'est qu'on a ces moun ça là et c'est connaît Jean Saint-Lici. Mais Jean Saint-Lici répond yo. Et que yo répond yo pas répond petit yo répond bien fort. Madam President, there is need for accountability. And I need to see those who are guilty answer to the taxpayers of St. Lucia. Nous pas ça quitter quantité millions de dollars aller. Et qu'actuellement mon ka dit qui manière plus fan France en cher gouvernement pas subsidize. Yo pas subsidize gaz. Si ka monter, ça ka monter. Mais si tout c'est l'argent ça là nous pas savons côté aller. Même manière, nous pas savons côté l'argent, injection juste pour Covid là, est juste toujours. Comme ça, c'est un gouvernement qui pas mêlé. L'argent pas ça, yo ka fait ça, yo vle pi. À quoi dit c'est play money. De vouer l'argent des soleils là, vouer l'argent parce que pas souhait pour l'argent. C'est Jean cette ici, c'est toi vaillant cette ici qui toi vaille pour l'argent. Et c'est toi vaillant cette ici qui ne pouvait payer l'argent because yo pas te joindre l'argent pour rien. Nous ten pour prêter l'argent. So et moun ça là, nous ka vle yo répondre. Tout c'est l'argent ça là, yo gaspillé. Yo gaspillé l'argent et c'est coiné gens cette ici à sous marché. Madam President, it's not only the patients, the people from the south at the hospital who have suffered. Remember, Madam President, that a prime sporting facility was supposed to have been used temporarily to house the patients pending repairs on the hospital. I don't know whether 13 years later would be a short-term or a temporary arrangement, because if my child was born 13 years ago, my child would have been at secondary school now. My child would have spent the entire term at preschool, at primary school, and would be at secondary school. So that cannot be a temporary arrangement. It is long overdue. And Madam President, I am from the southern part of the island. If I have spent a few days in hospital, it was at the St. Jude Hospital. Madam President, I have had to take my mother for medical attention at the hospital. And it is really disheartening to be jumping over pieces of metal, to be looking at a dilapidated building. What you see is rust, etc. How could that be conducive when people are talking about the long-term vision? So they have long-term vision of state-of-the-art hospital. During that time, what happens to the people and the workers at the hospital? They are left to languish, and we talk about our big dreams that will never be accomplished, Madam President, because where they are sitting on the other side, it seems they are there for a long time. Madam President, our school children have been deprived of the only venue they had for the inter-school sports, the sports meet. There was a lot of activity going on at the George Odlum Stadium. I was a school principal from Choiseul. That's where we went. That's where all of the schools in the south went for the sports meet. And these days, people have to be running around the place to see whether it is possible to have a sports meet for lack of a venue, Madam President. The young people in the south are still waiting because the venue now has become a hazard. Falling metal and no longer suited for any sporting activity. Lost opportunities, Madam President, for our budding athletes. A few of them survive, but there are so many of them, there's no place to practice. You need a standard field to know how good an athlete you are. And in the absence of a standard size stadium, you are shortchanging our young children. So, Madam President, it is time that we do justice to our young people. Senator Stanislas admits that this is the 4th administration and we still do not have a hospital. However, he speaks of a new site and an old site. I don't know which is the new site and the old site because I know there's it's the same compound. The St. Jude compound has not changed. I have known it all my life, and when I went there, it was the same compound I went to. I do not know whether Honorable Stanislas knows has a new compound that I don't know about. Madam President, world-class facility, state-of-the-art flashing mirrors. I am sure you remember the Pearl of the Caribbean. Up to now, I have not seen one new brick up in Vieux-Fort for any pool. I do not know, I am not a diver. Maybe the members of the opposition are divers and they have found pearls somewhere in Vieux-Fort, but we have not seen it because there is nothing to show. Not even the state-of-the-art hospital they were talking about has anything. It is empty. It's an empty box, Madam President. Madam President, I believe that the most prudent action that the government can take now is to finish the original buildings that are already covered, that have exterior walls. We know there were some challenges, but the report did say that they could be salvaged. To get the workers and patients out of the deplorable situation as soon as possible, Madam President, to place them in a building or in a setting that promotes healing, Madam President. Madam President, I wish to approve the recommendations presented by the Review Committee for the completion and commissioning of the St. Jude Hospital to facilitate the move and transfer of operations from the George Odlum National Stadium, not the National Hospital, the National Stadium, to the original St. Jude site. I don't know what problem some people have with the site, and this is where they put the box, but they're saying that the cabinet didn't give them an option of choosing a site or whatever. When you have spent so much money, in excess of $200 million in one location, would the Prime Minister or anybody in their good mind speak about another site to spend another set of money when we have buildings? But I understand that, Madam President, because when you have demolished building to put building, when you have destroyed some of the infrastructure to put a box, when you are thinking of fixing a bottom floor to put patients while you are building an upper floor, Madam President, this is madness. There is no other term for it. It is madness, and anybody in their correct mind wouldn't even think about that. To remove the patients from the George Odlum Stadium and to take them to a place of racket where there'll be noise all day, where water pipes in the ceiling may burst and wet them. It is just unbelievable when you hear people speaking in those terms, Madam President. So, Madam President, let me again give my commitment and my approval to the recommendations that are provided by the Cabinet. Thank you very much.
Senator Wilson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Like most senators before me, let me wish you, Madam President, and others here, a productive 2023. Let me thank you for your very warm words of welcome here this afternoon. And permit me, Madam President, to extend my deepest condolences to Senator Alison Jha on the passing of her father. And we pray that you may comfort her in those times. Madam President, as I rise here this afternoon to make my contribution on this very important motion before this august chamber, I cannot help but feel extremely nostalgic. For it was in this very august chamber, and which is called for very good reason, the Upper House, where I had the pleasure of serving between 2007 and 2011, that I understood most profoundly how decisions made by just a handful of men and women can either negatively impact or positively impact an entire population. Allow me, Madam President, to thank the Honorable Prime Minister for the opportunity, albeit briefly, to help shape public policy which will lead and guide our beloved country in the right direction. It is important, Madam President, to ensure that decisions made here are not guided by some narcissistic political agenda or driven by political retribution, but rather, Madam President, by sound advice that will positively impact our entire nation. And so, Madam President, I want to briefly respond to some of what was said by the leader of opposition business earlier in our house here today. And I wish he was here. And I wish, Madam President, that he was here. Because, Madam President, for the better part of 45 minutes he spent on his feet here this morning, a lot was said. But what really was said by the honorable member? Firstly, I want to tell the honorable member that Matthew chapter 12 verse 44 says, and I quote, "O generation of vipers, how can ye, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh." Towards the end of his presentation, Madam President, he said, and I quote him, "Another government should not fail on St. Jude's." And I wish that he had taken his own advice, because that is an admission of sort that his government had failed on St. Jude's. He went on, Madam President, to suggest that there was a lot of wastage, and he quoted an article from John Peters. We had no context to what was said, but he said quite a bit of what John Peters said. He went on to suggest that a letter from the Ministry of that spearheaded St. Jude's had put the final figure on the completion of phase 1 at 178 million. He spoke about aged buildings, about deterioration well ahead of the fire, And he further went on to say that the cost of the project that we are about to embark on has not been established. He went on further, Madam President, to say that the $70 million contract that one of my colleagues, Senator Jawahi, went on to explain was for works already done on the St. Jude's building. But I'm very happy that my colleague has already gone through that. So I don't have to go through that anymore. And then, Madam President, he went on to say that the company which undertook the technical audit of St. Jude's in 2016, in his words, was a reputable local company. I am not about to dispute anybody's credentials. That's not why I'm here. What I want to say, however, to the member opposite, is that for 5 years that he sat in a government, the people of this country had asked his government to have made the findings of that audit public. Because that is the basis that the former government abandoned a significant amount of work, over 75% completion on buildings, and decided to throw good money at a building that when they left office was less than 30% completed. So if in fact the company that was engaged was a reputable company, and if in fact that was the basis why the former buildings were abandoned, why could you not put up the document of your reputable company up for scrutiny by the public of St. Lucia? Why? Why? What was hidden in there that we should not know? And Madam President, the people of this country paid $1 million for that report. That's a lot of money. $1 million. But we'll find out why the report was not made public a little later as I go through my presentation. The senator also referenced in the report that we have before us here today that an oxygen generating plant, which from all indications was paid for ahead of the elections of 2016, but had not been shipped. And as the report indicated, the consultant at the time indicated that the equipment was ready to be shipped. Elections came mid-year, and a new government was in place. And so the senator is asking, where is the equipment? If he was interested, he would have been able to get the answer. Because we remember, Madam President, the former Minister of Economic Development took officers of the police force and other people on raids around this country, harassing people for property that belonged to the government of St. Lucia, connected to the St. Jude's project. But I guess, Madam President, the answer as to why that plant was not an issue for the government then is because it was not a consumable item. You see, the paints and the tiles, they had interest in. But an oxygen generating plant that can only be used at a hospital, they had no interest in that. The consumables they went after, but things we paid millions of dollars for that we need, and we still need them tomorrow if there's a hospital in Vieux-Fort, was of no interest to them. So, Madam President, I again say to the senator that out of the heart, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. And having said so, Madam President, I now shift to the focus of my presentation here today. Madam President, I firstly want to, like my colleagues here today, say thank you to the staff of the St. Jude's Hospital for a very sterling job that they have done. I live in the south of the island and I visit St. Jude's very often. Very often. I have had reason to spend 2 nights at the stadium, and I can speak of the quality of care that those people provide to St. Lucians on a daily basis under very difficult circumstances. And so, Madam President, again, like others here, I want to again convey this government's gratitude for the work that they have done and continue to do. But what is the history of this facility that we are here discussing today, Madam President? There was a fire on September 9th of 2009, and it ravaged the surgical ward of the hospital. 3 lives were lost. The Prime Minister at the time commenced reconstruction of the surgical ward in 2010. There was an election in 2011 and a change of government ensued. The government of 2011 continued along the same vein that the previous Prime Minister had started back in 2010. The same contractor was kept. The same consultant was kept. The same project team, the steering committee, were kept. What changed, Madam President, is that the scope of the project changed as time moved on. Rather than just a reconstruction of the surgical ward, the government of Dr. Kenny Anthony decided that apart from reconstructing the burnt surgical ward, that they were going to do extensive rehabilitative work on the east wing of the hospital to improve the quality of services afforded at the hospital. So as a result, buildings were gutted and new buildings were erected. By the time the elections came around in 2016, Madam President, the buildings were substantially completed. And from all the evidence we have here, all of the reports that have surfaced have corroborated that. They were fully covered, and if provisions for mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and other services that are consistent with our hospital. And I think it's important that I spend some time on that, Madam President, because the opposition would want us to believe that all that was there was buildings that were not fit for purpose. I want to spend some time on that, Madam President. I want to go over a document that was presented here earlier today, and I want to go to page 6 of it. The handover report, St. Jude's Reconstruction Project. And it says on page 6, Madam President, during the implementation of the works, additional requirements emerged, and after thorough consideration, government approved and agreed to explore options for financing and expansion of the scope of works, which included the additional components as listed as follows. Let me just go through that briefly, Madam President. Supply and installation of medical gas lines to patient areas. Supply and installation of fire alarm systems. Renovation of building for dialysis services and installation of relevant equipment. Construction of chapel and counseling rooms. Supply and installation of 178,000 imperial gallon water storage tank. Supply and installation of 25,000 imperial gallon wastewater treatment plant. Supply and installation of ventilation and air conditioning system for facility. Construction of additional storage areas. Installation of rainwater harvesting system. supply and installation of IMVA standby power generator, supply and installation of information technology infrastructure, including television and internet services, supply and installation of security system, including CCTV, construction of car park area, and complete landscaping and beautification of site. I say all that, Madam President, to underscore the fact that those buildings were 75% completed with all of those services already being accounted for in there. So it was not a barren, empty building as they would want you to believe. It was not. And if you go there today, Madam President, you will see the medical gas lines running through the entire building, the air conditioning system with the ducts, the electricals, the data cables in there, provisions for fire hydrants, etc., etc., etc. That is what we had in 2016. And as the report of their own consultants said, Madam President, the buildings were salvageable. There was great value in that institution already then. So why was a decision taken to abandon it, Madam President? I don't know. It does not make sense to me. Nothing that I heard from across the table this morning has helped me to be able to answer those burning questions about why did we throw good money at an unnecessary project. That is the burning question that occupies my mind. And I wish the leader of opposition business was here today to answer that. Why? What was the issue? None of the reports that he presented has shown any significant reason why we could not have completed those buildings. Madam President, the very report upon which they premised abandoning those buildings said, and I quote in the report that you have before you, the final report and recommendations of St. Jude's, on page 13, and I don't want to go through the entire thing, but let me just read a small section of it. However, we do see a great value present in the works completed to date and believe that the project is salvageable and could be converted into a facility that can properly serve the needs of St. Lucia. Why? Why are we here today, Madam President? We should not have been here today discussing the way forward for St. Jude's. No. That should have been an issue that should have been solved years ago. But we are here today, Madam President, importantly, Madam President, because it is necessary for us to move forward. 3 years went by between 2016 and 2019, and nothing happened. In 2019, the government at the time decided that they were going to abandon the buildings and go with a new structure. A lot of money has been spent on that building. A lot of figures have been bandied about. $118 million. We heard the Prime Minister on Tuesday saying that there is still some $36 million outstanding for the main contractor. We also heard a report where the roofs are incomplete and another $16 million is needed just to cover the building and to stop rain from coming in and deteriorate what is already in there. What we have for all of that money, Madam President, are empty buildings. And I don't like to use the term box, but there is no better word of describing it than a box. Empty. Empty. Absolutely nothing but piles of drywall inside of there. That's all, Madam President, we have for all that money. That's all. Madam President, what is even more concerning to me is that this report that we have here, on page 16, and when I heard the opposition members speaking about completing that facility, it really begs a question, 7.7. The administration of St. Jude Hospital has disclosed that unlike the active involvement it enjoyed and participated in during the development and designs and construction of phase 1, there was very limited interface with the design team of phase 2. That's instructive. The St. Jude Hospital also reported, and hear this one, that it was not until the end of the first quarter of 2021, and that's months before the general election, the end of the first quarter of 2021 is sometime about April. Elections was in July. When a transition plan was developed for the transfer of operations from the National Stadium into the lower level of the new west wing of phase 2 of that structure, that the hospital was engaged in the consultation process. So you know what that means, Madam President? They wanted to pull the wool over the eyes of St. Lucians and make you believe that it was ready for occupation by the hospital. So a few days before the elections, they engage the hospital staff and tell them, move into the buildings so that people will believe that we have a hospital. That's the reality. That is the reality this report tells us here. And it says the same about the Ministry of Health in 7.8 also. Very little stakeholder consultation. The hospital, at the end of the day, will belong to the Ministry of Health. How can there be such little consultation with those it is intended for their use? And they want us to believe, Madam President, that we are making a mistake by not continuing with the ill-fated, ill-designed project? How can that be? That doesn't make sense. Madam President, what also strikes me, and the independent senator referred to it here earlier today, a significant part of phase 1 would have been used either way the hospital is completed. Whether we had gone with the initial east wing or the west wing, the kitchen, the laundry, he mentioned those two, but it goes further than that. Maintenance, administrative offices would also be located on the west wing. The volunteer quarters is in that very same area. So while they wanted you to believe that they were so far, you know what they did, Madam President? They gutted parts of the west wing. But it is further away from completion today than it was when they inherited government in 2016. And equipment that was already there for the operation of the kitchen, God knows where it is today. They attempted to purchase new equipment for the kitchen. This is where our money went to. That is what happened. This is the story about St. Jude's. And when, Madam President, I hear people come and speak almost as an authority on St. Jude's and as if this government has no plan and the ship is lost, what are they saying? Where is your ship? You commissioned a report you made us pay $1 million for, but you never had the confidence to tell the people, here is the report. Why? Why? Was that some get-rich scheme? Madam President, the government has decided to seek the support of Parliament in moving forward this project. This project has been around for much too long. And the people of St. Lucia have to be told in no uncertain terms how their money has been spent. We have an obligation to tell the people. That's not our money, you know. That's their money. There has been too much wastage on this project. And we can no longer continue to throw away money at this project. And Madam President, very importantly, as a young person, I am of the view that there is a need for this and every succeeding government in this country to take people into their confidence and tell them the truth. Painful as it is, do not hold back information. So when I hear those on the other side saying that Parliament is only responsible for legislation and so on, why can't the people know in Parliament how their monies have been spent to? There is a need for us to restore the confidence of people in our politics and in our political systems and in government. Too many people are giving hope on politicians. You know why? Because they use the word transparency when it's convenient for them. And when it is not convenient for them, they don't want the word transparency. So the truth about St. Jude's is coming out here, and about how much money has gone down the drain. So they want you to believe that that's an issue only for cabinet to decide on. That's an pièce, Madam President. And finally, Madam President, young people need the stadium. We have occupied that stadium for much too long. I remember attending a Carifta meet in that stadium, I believe it was in 2008, if I am not mistaken. And I was proud to have seen young athletes from St. Lucia and the region show what they are capable of. Madam President, we need to do better by our young people. We need to give them that facility as soon as possible. We have denied them full use of that facility for 13 years, and that has gone on for much too long. We have to expedite the move and to get us out of there. But before I conclude, Madam President, I also want to respond to something that the member, the leader of opposition business, said. And I want to think that he knows better when he says those things. But he said earlier that the government is spending $10 million just to throw chemical inside of phase 1. That is the furthest thing away from the truth, Madam President. I heard on several occasions the government, through the Prime Minister, has said that the initial works have a cost attached to it of $5 million. And the works are do not only include cleaning of the hospital. That is a major component of it, because the amount of bat infestation that was in there needed to be dealt with. The amount of animals that have strayed onto the compound and have littered the entire compound with whatever had to be dealt with. But also importantly, Madam President, and I think one senator alluded to it earlier, the compound is not properly secured. And over the last 6 years or so, persons have helped themselves onto that compound and have stolen wires, copper, and everything else that they could have stolen. That $5 million also includes fencing of the entire compound to make it more secure. And that is important, Madam President, because we cannot allow persons to have their way on a facility as important as that. Let me once again, Madam President.
Senator Wilson, you have 15 minutes more to complete your contribution.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me express gratitude to the doctors, nurses, and staff of the St. Jude's Hospital once again for the stellar job that they have done under very difficult circumstances. Today's discussion, Madam President, sends a very strong signal of the commitment. It is an unambiguous declaration that this government takes its job seriously. We did not come here merely, Madam President, to score political points. Because the reality is, political points will not deliver a hospital. It will not take away from the pain and suffering of the people of the South. The undertaking that we give the people of this country today is that we have decided on the way forward for St. Jude's. The government has begun the process of engaging the DCA to ensure that it is compliant with all aspects of the law before construction at the hospital resumes. Those buildings, Madam President, were substantially completed, and it would be a shame to allow those buildings to rot. The path that the government has chosen, not only is it the most fiscally prudent path, but it also represents the most timely way of getting us where we want to get. We implore the citizenry to continue to be a little more patient with us. We know that their patience is running thin. I see it all the time when I visit social media. People say that we have had enough talk about St. Jude's. We only want to see a finished product. But we want to give you a good product. And we are going to deliver a good product. And so, Madam President, I support this motion entirely. And it is my hope that the next time anything regarding to St. Jude's comes before this House, it involves a moment of grand celebration. Thank you.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Before I present a brief rebuttal, I want to commend my colleague. I think the Prime Minister would be very pleased that his appointment for today was indeed the right move to, first of all, ensure that the debate was given the full treatment. And by the way, it was done in accordance with the Constitution. And sometime later in my rebuttal, Madam President, I will explain why I said so. Madam President, as I stand to rebut on this motion, I again want to bring to the attention of the Senate that perhaps this is the 5th consecutive time that I stand to rebut, to respond to my colleagues when they have made their submission, and I look across at an empty chair where the leader of opposition business is supposed to be. I heard you earlier mention the issue of the committee's meeting. I am a member of one of or two of these committees, and I think we may need to call to action maybe the Privileges Committee and others that have to bring to the attention of members their responsibilities and duties in the Senate. I heard the leader of government business in the other chamber make a similar plea, and I would like to echo it in this chamber. This is a place where we come to do the business of the people. We are appointed, albeit not elected, but we are here to serve and do the business of the people. Now, I have no difficulty if a member may have to be excused for a little while, or, to a bathroom break or an emergency. But it cannot be by accident that every time I stand to rebut, I am looking at an empty chair where the leader of opposition business is supposed to be sitting. And so, Madam President, I want it to be noted in the records that this may be the 5th consecutive time that this is happening in this chamber, and I think it is a very serious issue, and we need to start showing some respect for what the people have expect us to do. Madam President, so I want to start by indicating that this debate has revealed a lot. From the lower house and again today, there is so much that has been unveiled and so much that has come to the table because we decided to table this motion. And whereas some persons may attempt to treat it as unnecessary and indicate that there is no reason why we should have come to this house, it has shown in hindsight that it was a decision that the people of St. Lucia will benefit from and a decision that proved to be necessary. I welcome the various contributions made by my colleagues in this chamber, both the opposition, my colleagues on the government side, and particularly the independent senator. And I will come to his presentation and try to respond to some of his observations later. But Madam President, I want to begin. Thankfully, some of my colleagues have responded in some way to the comments by the leader of opposition business. And in his absence, I'm not sure who I'll be talking to, but I will attempt to touch on a couple of issues that he raised. First of all, it was acknowledged that about $60 million was spent before the government of the St. Lucia Labour Party came into office. That is true. The former Prime Minister, Honorable Stephenson King, mentioned that, and it is correct. But, Madam President, it is important to note that that money was spent in a reconstruction effort from 2010 by the UWP government. It was being spent on the original site. All of what happened prior to the UWP coming into office in 2016, from the time the reconstruction work started, all of what happened was happening on the original site of the hospital. And so the argument stands that there must be a reason why both the Stephenson King administration and the Kenny Anthony administration, in their efforts to reconstruct and rehabilitate the hospital, chose to do the work on the original site, which is where we are returning to today. It was only one particular Prime Minister and his government who felt, after 3 years of neglect, that they certainly wanted to do something different. And it is proven now that, Madam President, that it was not successful, it will never be successful, it was never a good idea. And to date, what is happening? We have spent millions, and I don't want to go back to the figures, and as correctly pointed out by some of my colleagues in this chamber, notably the independent senator, millions and millions have been spent. And Madam President, the fundamental question remains, after all of that money has been spent, what do we have today? What do we have to show? Where is the hospital? Where is it? Where are the nurses, the doctors, the staff of St. Jude Hospital, and the patients? If you have to answer this question today, Madam President, they are in a sports stadium. That is the truth. That is where they are. That is where we are today, and that is why we will not be rushed and pushed and bullied, but we will do what is right. We will do it properly, so that we never have to return to this chamber to start over and to have people endure that kind of pain. Madam President, I know why the opposition is anxious. The opposition can see. They can see where we're going. They can see a hospital being completed in a short space of time. They can see the people of the South in the St. Jude Hospital moving out of the stadium and going into a proper health facility. They have realized that this is going to happen. And I can understand their discomfort, Madam President. They know the result of that. They can't handle this. And so there is every effort to try to create some kind of cloud. But Madam President, we know that anytime the opposition starts to fuss about something, it's because we know it's good. And so we will continue to do what is good and what is right. I listened to a lecture on John Peters from the leader of opposition business, clamoring about, 3 years of stoppage and what followed. Well, if there was an issue, what was their response to all the recommendations that John Peters made? Trying to suggest that John Peters saw everything wrong with what we were doing prior to their ascension to government. But if you had noticed that and you had that report, and we heard all the reports, what was your response to John Peters' recommendations? What was your response? No work for 3 years? Is that how you respond to recommendations that all of these things needed to be fixed? You just decided no work for 3 years? Madam President, there was also an issue about how many recommendations and how many reports had come through. But Madam President, the sum result of that was that we had gone about 3 years backward by the time this government resumed office. Now I want to make the next point in both English and Creole. Madam President, as we speak today, do you know that every month this government is paying bills? Do you know that some people are getting paid for work that was done on St. Jude every month? Madam President, est-ce que vous savez, aujourd'hui, quand nous ici, tous les mois, l'année moun qui a allé à la banque là, eh bien, sur un compte, qui a draw l'argent, qui a trouvé payer pour le travail qui fait à la St. Jude, tous les mois. Et puis nous pas ni à l'hôpital. Madam President, the issue is, as we speak, there are people who were contracted by the former government who are receiving interest payments and all kinds of payments in the name of that hospital that we do not have. So our taxpayers are paying people who have not completed the hospital for us. And as a government, what can we say? We're not going to pay them? They are contracted. They are commitments to honor. You got to trouver l'argent, nous pas ni pièce l'hôpital. And that is a very instructive issue, Madam President. Now in this chamber, and you know my character, I'm not about to go and start naming people. But I think we all know who they are. And they are the very same people who have their surrogates and their friends coming out on social media, even in this chamber, trying to make it seem as if our government or this government has to take responsibility when the money that is being paid for the work at the hospital is going into their pockets up to this day. That cannot be right, Madam President. That cannot be right. Madam President, we heard that there was the leader of opposition business contended the issue, or tried to contend the issue, that the $17 million loan that we mentioned was for payment of works. But I think we handled this already. And when he was stopped by my colleague senator to try to clarify the statement, he tried to wiggle around it, as he always does. But I want to remind him that if a government decides a few days before elections, when they are not even, the House has been dissolved, to go and attempt to borrow money, whatever the reason, you have to wonder, what is the motive? So I'll leave it at that. Now, the point of completion percentage was properly handled. And I think even the independent senator also referred to it. You see, when you come to this house or this chamber with the wrong intention, you always get caught. Because the Prime Minister happened to find and select a group of people with some level of intelligence, and some of us who can pay attention when people try to read things from a paper. They don't realize that if I have a document and you're reading, that I can read the same thing you're reading. And if you're trying to hide something, that I can see it. It's basic. So when we come to the Senate, instead of paying attention to the issues of the motion, there's an attempt to try to twist and maneuver to create an impression that is false. Yet, the member insists that he actually commended me for saying that we should not politicize the issue. And he made the statement, but everything he said was doing the exact opposite, trying to take the facts and twist them around and create political, what I call opportunism. But thankfully, I want to thank Senator Toussaint for catching him and straightening him up. Madam President, instead of again talking to the issue, we saw a whole drama, a whole dramatization of events, trying to even, if I may use the term, papi show, or ridicule Malcolm X. He happens to be one of my black heroes, trying to papi show Malcolm X and saying we don't have the figure, he's an X and so on. Well, Madam President, he's not there, but I could tell him, I can see why he has a problem with X, because there's a lot of X's that caused him to be over there. A lot of X's for Wayne Girard or for the Labour Party in Ancillary. That landed him on that side of the House. And I think it's about time the opposition begins to learn. I think Senator Lee made that point. They need to begin to learn a lesson and learn from their mistakes. I see the very same pattern repeating itself, the very same reasons why St. Lucians decided to vote them out. They are continuing with the same thing, coming to the House and trying to use those, twisted arguments, going after individuals on social media, going after the Prime Minister about vehicle and house, going after the Honorable Jeremiah Norbert about, things he owns, going after the Honorable Casimir about trips and monies paid, just attacking people. How do you expect people to take you seriously when all you decide to do is to go and attack people? We are in the Senate discussing a very important motion where all of us have agreed that a hospital needs to be reconstructed as soon as possible. You come to the Senate, instead of finding the arguments that maybe weak or may need some fixing and offer some advice, you're attacking people and making fun of people's names. I mean, is that what we are expected to do in this chamber? I've always said, Madam President, when I was in the opposition, that I insist that the Senate has to be, that's why they call it the House of Lords. There needs to be a certain level of decorum and class and substance in the arguments presented. But some of us insist that we want to take it down the road of ridicule and, I really would like this to stop, Madam President. We need more quality. We need people in this country, when they tune in and they're paying attention to the discussion, can get some substance out of it. And some of us just do not learn. I don't want to give much more treatment to that line of discussion. And so, Madam President, I just want to remind the member in his absence, and I'm sure his colleague here can tell him, that when he mentioned point 9.3, the oxygen plant and so on, I think he has to remember that July 16th, that is the time he mentioned that the plant was commissioned and should have been ordered. The elections of June 6 was about a month before that. And so it clearly means that if you come into government and you find that something has been ordered, procured, and ready to be shipped, you spent almost over 5 years, did nothing about it. You know that the thing was there, it's an important piece of equipment. You spent 5 years, you don't go and find out where it is or why it should be here. And you come back to this Senate a year and a half plus 5, 6.5 years later to ask me about it? Madam President, ou vini ou point charge à dans situation. Là n'y a bagay qui supposé venir ou supposé garder côté bagay là ou pas ouais. Ou fait 5 l'année au gouvernement, ou pas chercher pour lui. Ou pas vle sav côté yé. Ou ka vini, yo l'année et demi après ça. Ça veut dire 6 l'année et demi après. Et ou ka mande moins pour lui. Something that you had every opportunity to find. So why did we have to hear about this again, Madam President? Is because the opposition is not interested in this debate. They're not interested in St. Jude Hospital. They're interested in going and find all kinds of other arguments to distract people and take the attention away from the essence of the debate. But because of the quality of this government Senate, it's not going to happen, and I will not let it slip. Madam President, in the discussion, the leader of opposition business, again not having any substance on this debate, tried to call himself a tourism man. I think that's what he said. He's not something, but he's a tourism man. He's not an engineer, but he's a tourism man. How is that relevant to this debate? And by the way, let me just remind the leader of opposition business, who I'm really sorry he can't, who bestowed that honor on him? Well, just a little bit about it. You know, if you are a tourism man, I mean, who bestowed that honor on you? By the way, while I don't propose to be a tourism man, neither would I describe my colleague, Minister of Tourism, as a tourism man. But I can tell you the results of tourism work are showing now. Yesterday, Madam President, may I inform you that the largest cruise ship ever to have docked in St. Lucia docked in our harbor yesterday. Let me tell you the name, Madam President. It was the Avia from the P&O cruise group. Over 6,000 passengers, largest ever. And I can show you photos, Madam President, of over 1,500 visitors who disembarked, walking through the market in Castries, patronizing our bars, buying Peter Bear, eating from our restaurants for the day. When I was coming down to work, jam-packed traffic, I had to take about 15 minutes to move from Bridge Street to my office because there was so much movement and activity in the city. And I am sure if you measure the impact of their spend on the if I can call it the Castries city economy, you would have found some serious money spent there yesterday for maybe 5 hours. That is what we should be talking about. Tourism man. Key tourism man. So, Madam President, I want to remind the opposition, when we come to this House, let us try to stick to the debate. Don't try to go into, every time they digress, there's still a problem. You go to tourism, man, you still have a problem because it's right there in your face. Let us stick to the essence of the debate. And so, Madam President, I want to just leave a message with the leader of opposition business. And since he's not there, I'll leave the message with his colleague senator, who I must say today had a different posture. Madam President, all I think the message I would like to leave with him is to just advise his leader, who is in the lower house, that all he needed to do yesterday, or not on yesterday, on Tuesday when he stood up to speak, was to apologize to the people of Miku South and the people of the South for the pain and suffering that they endured under his watch because they did not complete the St. Jude Hospital. That would have been perfect in terms of his debate in the House. Now, Madam President, Senator Lee, the independent senator, I was saying to him during the lunch break that there was some serious, he made some serious points. He really, jolted us. And I appreciate that. You see, we're not a government who fights with people because they don't agree with us. And we go after them and chastise them. He's an independent senator, and I expect when he comes to the Senate that he will be independent, and where he has to say what he has to say, he says it. Whether we like it, whether it's in our favor or not. And sometimes when he speaks, I take my notes, I listen, because there's essence. I may not agree, but the essence of what he says has to be respected. And so, Madam President, he made a statement. He said that basically St. Jude, it can be described as a catalog of failures. I have my own reservations about that. But one thing I will assure him, that in this catalogue, in the history will show that the administration of Philip Joseph Pierre will not form part of that catalogue of failures. I assure him of that. I can't speak to previous ones because they've all gone. And there's evidence to show that the hospital was not completed. But under this administration led by Philip Joseph Pierre, that catalogue, he will not be part of that. Madam President, I also want to say that based on the comments he made about the executive coming to the House when they have already made certain decisions, I think it must be clear that this government operates only by the rule of law. The executive does not believe that they have all the answers and make all the decisions. And coming to this House, there is a clear demonstration that we believe that St. Lucians have to be given full accountability of what transpired and full disclosure of what happened. And also, it is a demonstration of respect for professionals, public servants, and all those persons who are charged with the responsibility. In fact, in the debate, you would have found that we have revealed a lot of information that could only have been discovered and disclosed by these professionals. As politicians, we couldn't have gone in there and stretch our arms and do those things and just give arbitrary information. So I think there was reason for us to come to this chamber to really give full disclosure of what transpired, as well as what the intention is. You mentioned lessons learned, and I agree. Except that there's only one group of people who are not learning any lessons, and I've given you reasons why, Madam President, so I'm not going back there. There was also a mention of the report not being laid before the House. A number of reports were referred to and not be laid before the House. Madam President, sadly, the independent senator is correct that there were about 4 or 5 reports being referenced and not have been laid before the House. In fact, one of my colleague senators did mention that the former Prime Minister was reading extensively from a report that he only now seemed to have found that existed. A report that was available but was never tabled, but he would have read extensively from it. I will say to the independent senator that the only report, this Labour Party government is responsible for only one report. And that is the report of the review committee. That is what we commissioned when we came into office. And so that report has been tabled. So whereas I agree that there were many other reports that were not tabled, and I think correctly should have been tabled, we'll take responsibility for one, and we have indeed tabled it. So I wanted to make the distinction as to who tabled what. I'll say it again. The Labour Party commissioned one report by the review committee. That report has been submitted, and it has been tabled. The other reports, we are not responsible for them because we didn't commission them. So, Madam President, let me now quickly move to a situation that I must respond to. I noted Senator Stanislas, who thankfully is in his chair and can hear me. He was very different today in his presentation. I don't know if it's political maturity or I don't know what it is. And I don't want to seem to be commending him. That's not my role. But I think he was very guarded. But I noted, however, that he was very skillful in making a very interesting point. A very interesting point that I didn't miss out on. And I say so because that point has also been made by the political leader of of the opposition, or the leader of the opposition. And that point, Madam President, is trying to compare the role of Parliament or the legislature as far as them providing, advising the cabinet. That point was made. What is the role of the Parliament, and why are we taking this motion to the Parliament, as if to suggest that the Parliament should not be advising the cabinet. And I want to make something clear, Madam President. I want to respond to that. You see, the opposition today is a perfect example of do what I say, but not as I do. And I'm not sure that they are in any position, morally or otherwise, to advise on such issues. And I will give you 3 examples, Madam President. In the interest of time, I will only select 3 examples. I totally agree that the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, as we know, the 3 independent arms of government, should be allowed to function independently. They have their functions and their roles. But, Madam President, I can draw examples from all 3 arms of government where the opposition then in government seem not to have any understanding or regard for these roles. And so I am making the point that I don't think that neither the leader of the opposition or any of the senators on this side of the House are in a moral or any other position to advise as to who should advise who. Madam President, I will start with the example from the legislature. It's the legislature that meets in this House. And this opposition then in government clearly demonstrated that they had no regard for a very important function of the legislature, and that was to elect the deputy speaker. Do you remember that? 5 years in government, no deputy speaker. That's the role of the legislature. Well, they want to advise on that. Madam President, I also want to draw another example. And that was an issue where it was argued that the role of Parliament is only to what? Make laws and to authorize expenditure. These were the words of his leader. And this morning, the member alluded to a similar sentiment or made a similar pronouncement. Well, Madam President, let me inform him that it is not unusual or unprecedented for the Parliament to advise the executive. Because I can remind him, and I took my time to check it, that the United Workers' Party government actually has done that. And I'll give you the example. Based on the Constitution, Madam President, if you look through the sections, you will see which arms or which arms of government or what roles are most important. For example, the first section of the Constitution, Madam President, its focus is the rights and freedoms of its citizens. That's the focus. And then the Parliament comes in third. That's the third area. Do you know where the executive features, Madam President? If you go through the Constitution, it's all the way down to section 59. It's all the way down there. So in terms of who advises who and who is, well, the order of priority and importance, the legislature features very, very highly. So what is the logic in the legislature cannot advise the cabinet? What is that? That logic it doesn't stick. And Madam President, that issue of the legislature being the most important part, or the one that is featured first, is really showing the fundamentals of democracy. That is why the lower house, the House of Representatives, is the house that can approve spending of money. Do you know why, Madam President? Because that is where you find the members who are elected by the people. That is where you find them. The Senate can't do that. We don't deal with money bills in the Senate because the people who elected the representatives, the elected representatives are the people who deal with that. So the legislature is important. So who is to say that they cannot advise the cabinet? In the cabinet of ministers, you will find non-elected members, Madam President. Anybody can be appointed a senator and can be made a minister. But the legislature In this case, we have 15 there are 17 members who are elected. That's why those of us here, we can't do that. Nobody elected us. So, Madam President, to suggest that there is no merit in taking this motion to the legislature is a gross misrepresentation of what the Constitution of our country intended. So, Madam President, let me give you an example where this government actually did exactly what they are telling us we should not do. Let's go back to 2009, Madam President. A United Workers' Party government sought to advise the cabinet, and they came to the parliament with a motion to advise the cabinet on how to deal with a number of issues in an effort to deal with, quote unquote, the former prime minister. And among them was the NCA, Rochamel, that they spoke about so many times, and Fenwell and all of that. They came to the House in 2009 to do that. But today, we're not supposed to do it. By the way, it was not wrong to do it then. Madam President, I want to draw another example of this government's inability to advise on matters that should deal with procedure in the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. I was an opposition senator sitting over there, Madam President, when a COVID bill, there was an attempt to pass a COVID bill that there was a lot of discussion and issues with. And the then government knew that there was going to be an issue with the bill. And that government then, Madam President, appointed 2 independent senators. 2 independent senators. One of which was, in my opinion, unconstitutionally appointed. Madam President, the Constitution is very clear on what conditions you can appoint senators. We have an appointed senator today from the government side. The conditions are clear, and I said I was going to return to it. He's here because the Senator Jean is out of state, consistent with Section 28(1) of the Constitution. The only way you can appoint appoint senators is to replace senators that are ill or out of state. This government appointed 2 independent senators when Senator Auger was not out of state and he was not ill. They knew he was not going to be present, but he never indicated that he was ill or out of state. And there were 2 independents, and remember, they were independent senators, and there is a process to appoint them.
Senator, you have 15 minutes to continue.
Thank you, Madam President. I will finish within that time. But I need to take time to explain to the Senate why there are certain things that the opposition attempts to advise on and speak against, and they are exactly the perfect examples of the opposite. I cannot allow these things to continue, Madam President. We have to speak to that. Appointed 2 independent senators, and there's a process. It has to go through civil society. Independent senators are not government senators. Came to this House and passed a bill. And the appointment process, Madam President, was in violation of the Constitution. So, Madam President, you come here and you tell me that the legislature cannot advise the government as if you respect procedure. Madam President, in addition, these 2 independent senators were card-bearing members of their party. How could you, in the face of democracy, do something like this? And I'm not saying that because I heard about it. I was sitting in that very chair. I was sitting in that very chair where Senator Stanislas was sitting. Senator Joachim Henry and the other senator was Senator Prosper, I think, or Senator Jawayu. Thank you. I was sitting there and I saw that happen. But today you want to come and advise and speak to the press about the role of the legislature as if you are an authority on it. Madam President, finally, on that matter, this government, when they assumed office in 2016, did not come to this house within the constituted period. And say I lie if I lie. They didn't. But not a violation. You know, you don't have the authority, the moral authority to advise on those things. So don't try to do it. I don't like to go and speak about what this government does. But in today's case, Madam President, I must do so. And when the leader was chastised and questioned about it, he said there were no sanctions. So just because you can't get punished for something, you should do it, even if you know it's wrong. One more example, Madam President, and that one has to do with the judiciary. I've given you examples of where the legislature has faltered, where the executive has faltered. I'll give you an example of where they have interfered with the judiciary. Some of us here may be young, but we not remember, but I'll give you an example. A Chief Justice, Madam President, by the name of Sir Hugh Rawlins, his security detail was withdrawn. Do you know that, Madam President? His security detail, which is something he's entitled to. That's a Chief Justice, that's a member of the judiciary. You don't interfere with these people. Was withdrawn under the instructions of a then Minister for National Security, who has a little less hair than myself, and run against our current Prime Minister. Yes, Madam President, withdrawn. That is direct interference by an executive, not even an elected member, you know. An appointed member of the executive withdrawing the privileges of a member of the judiciary. You see what so today, I cannot understand how a member of this opposition has any authority to advise on what should come to the House and whether the legislature should be advising the executive. So, Madam President, I want to end on this. There's the argument on whether the Parliament should come, the motion should come to Parliament to approve what the executive does. And I think the independent senator also mentioned it. But I must say, Madam President, who is going to approve the monies that we are going to spend on the reconstruction of St. Jude Hospital? Who is going to spend it? And the opposition senator says that's different. But if we're going to come back here to ask this very Parliament to spend money, we might as well come before to explain to them what we are going to do. That's what we're doing. We are telling the people, and we come to the Parliament to declare what has happened and to explain our intentions. We are seeking the approval of Parliament even before we come back, because we're going to have to come back here to seek the approval of Parliament to spend the money that we're going to spend on the reconstruction efforts. And so, if we need your permission to spend money, we need your permission before we even spend the money to decide what we're going to spend the money on. So, Madam President, I wanted to take my time this evening to explain those things and to draw these examples to the attention of the Senate and our viewers and listeners, to make a very simple point, that when you live in a glass house, don't throw stones. Very simple. I appreciate advice and criticism, constructive that is, but be very careful when you attempt to pull up people and you find yourself guilty of the same, especially when what the person is doing is not wrong. Now, I'm not saying that just because you did something wrong, that somebody has a right to do the wrong. If it's wrong, even if you've done the wrong, you can say it's wrong. But what we're doing, there is no wrong in it. And you've done it too. So if you've done something that is right, or procedural, or appropriate, and the government decides to do it, then please, save yourself, because the emperor will be found to be naked. So, Madam President, I want to reiterate the support of the government and myself, the senators, for this motion. I look forward, as was mentioned by the last speaker, to the day that we will come to this Honorable Senate, to this House and this Senate, to speak about the completion of St. Jude, to speak about our plans for further expansion of St. Jude Hospital, to speak about the programs that have been implemented for the management and operations of the St. Jude Hospital, but not to return to this House or the Senate to talk about the reconstruction. I look forward to the completion of this project and to the benefit that it's going to bring to the people of the South and the people of this country. I thank you, Madam President.
Senators, be it resolved, 1, that the Parliament of St. Lucia acknowledges receipt of the report of the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project Review Committee, hereinafter referred to as the Review Committee, and expresses its profound thanks and gratitude to the members of the Review Committee for their sterling contribution, diligence, and selfless dedication in completing the report. 2, that the Parliament of St. Lucia do advise the Cabinet of Ministers to consider and approve the recommendations presented by the Review Committee for the completion and commissioning of the St. Jude Hospital to facilitate the move and transfer operations from the George Odlum National Stadium to the original St. Jude Hospital site. 3, that the Parliament of St. Lucia do advise the Cabinet of Ministers to explore other sustainable health opportunities for the St. Jude Hospital site. And 4, that the Parliament of St. Lucia, cognizant of the distressing conditions of the St. Jude Hospital at the George Odlum National Stadium, further expresses its profound gratitude to the doctors, nurses, staff, and patients for their contribution, dedication, patience, and commitment over the years. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Bills. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Agreement for Establishing of a Partnership between the Member States of the Caribbean Community and the African Export-Import Bank.
Agreement for the establishment of a partnership between Member States of the Caribbean Community and the African Export-Import Bank.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Honorable members, senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you again, Madam President. Madam President, I move for the second reading of a bill shortly entitled Agreement for Establishment of a Partnership between the Member States of the Caribbean Community and the African Export-Import Bank. Madam President, this piece of this bill really seeks to allow us to, as a country, access an additional line of financing, which we will all agree at this time is very critical. This agreement, which is established for the the partnership between the member states of the Eastern Caribbean and the African Export-Import Bank, it seeks to give effect to the agreement for the establishment of a partnership between the member states of the Caribbean and the bank. On the 1st of September 2022, the agreement for the establishment of the partnership was executed in Bridgetown, Barbados. the signatories being Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Commonwealth of Dominica, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, and the Republic of Suriname. So all of these countries signed on at that time. And after the execution and ratification, St. Lucia gave legal effect to the agreement. So this must be achieved by passing or going through the legislative process, which is what we are here to do. As a result, Madam President, the agreement is given the force of law in St. Lucia, that is, in clause 3 of the bill. If an amendment is subsequently made to the agreement, clause 4 of the bill empowers the Minister of Finance to make an order that specifies the amendments to the agreement. In accordance with clause 5 of the bill, Madam President, the Minister may also make regulations for giving effect to the provisions in the bill. The text of the agreement is presented in the schedule that is attached to the bill. That bank, the African Export-Import Bank, was established in 1993, 8th May 1993, as a multilateral development finance institution with judicial personality by an agreement signed in Abidjan in the Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire. It's an accelerated member of the African Union and has deepened Africa's marketing integration and significantly increased the volume of trade that the African countries undertake among themselves and made significant contribution to the economic integration and African continental free trade area implementation. So, Madam President, it clearly shows that the African countries have strengthened their financial position by having this financial institution, and they are extending its or extending the privilege to us in this region to be able to access it. The creation of linkages between Africa and the Caribbean will promote and expand two-way trade between Africa and the Caribbean, stimulate economic development, and promote South-South cooperation. And South-South cooperation is something that I think we need to explore. We need to be able to move away from the traditional, or not move away, but to extend our lending capacity or borrowing capacity from the traditional North End and usual World Bank and those others. Therefore, one of the objects and powers of the bank is to facilitate, promote, and expand intra-Africa, extra-African trade, and to promote finance South-South trade between Africa and the Caribbean countries. I think that's where all of our descendants came from, so it would be nice if we know that we can finally interact at that level. In keeping with the goals of the bank, Madam President, the agreement creates an international partnership for the engagement between the bank and member states of the Caribbean community. Some of the matters agreed by the parties to the agreement are, and I'll just indicate them: 1, to cooperate to support and provide assistance of all types and nature to enable the promotion of financing to South-South trade between Africa and member states of the Caribbean community. 2, to promote to the extent possible under the establishment agreement the financing by the bank of exports and imports of non-traditional African goods and services of the member states of the Caribbean community in any appropriate form through extending direct or indirect credit to eligible businesses in participating states. That's very critical. We have to extend our arms of trade. 3, to collaborate, support, and promote the work of the bank in acting as an intermediary between African exporters and importers of the member states of the Caribbean community through the issuance of letters of credit, guarantees, or other trade documents in support of export-import transactions. According to the agreement, the bank may establish representative offices, agencies, or subsidiaries in the member states of the Caribbean community, and I hope that brings about increased employment opportunities, Madam President, for our people. In furtherance of this agreement, the bank gives various immunities, privileges, facilities, concessions, and fiscal exemptions. While I am not one who promotes us jumping at every opportunity to borrow or to engage in sourcing finance, I remember sitting in the opposition and hearing the former Prime Minister say, we are proud to be able to borrow. I don't think we'll ever say that. We'll be proud to be able to borrow. If you don't have to borrow, it's better. But when you have the opportunity to borrow at concessionary rates from a reputable institution, then there's a sense of security about what you're doing. And if it becomes necessary, I think that this is a welcome additional line of financing for us in the region. And so this is exactly what this bill attempts to do. Basically to ratify this agreement and give Parliament to give the approval for us to be able to access finance, if necessary, from the African Export-Import Bank. So I put this to this honorable, to the Senate, Madam President, surely, hopefully, for its concurrence.
Senators, the question is that the agreement for the establishment of a partnership between member states of the Caribbean Community and the African Export-Import Bank bill be read a second time. Senator Lee.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam President. Just permit me very shortly to laud and support this particular piece of legislation. I think I note the benefits in terms of trade and access to finance that the leader of government's business has brought forward. But for me, and I think for most of us, we sit and think about it, as the descendants of persons from the African continent largely, I think there's great significance in the fact that we are able to set up trade links freely with the African continent. And I hope that we will seize the opportunity that this new market will provide us, a market that perhaps will feel more natural to us, because a lot of the cultural links are there. We may not recognize them, but I think with Afrobeats and all, the increasing exposure to African culture, we realize just how close we really are. And hopefully we can take advantage of that, not just to borrow money, but also to export goods, export our culture, export our services to the African continent, and that we can benefit more greatly as a result. So I just want to support, but Lord, I think we need to note the fact that this is a chance for us as African descendants to really reconnect with the motherland in a positive and tangible manner. Thank you.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I just wanted to really, thank the independent senator for that observation. And it just brought me to one particular point when he mentioned cultural links. It is very true that we share quite a bit of cultural connection with this continent and the countries. And don't forget, people sometimes even refer to Africa as a country, and it's really a continent. And there are so many different countries with so many different diverse differences. But I think when you mention culture, being from the Ministry of Creative Industries, there are quite a lot of links that one can envisage. And I think there was a great call from some persons for particular African artists coming to our country, Next Jazz, for example, Carnival. So I can see the linkages and the opportunities. Don't forget that the markets they also offer, there is a great a need for entertainment and exporting our entertainment packages. There is also an issue of food security that we all face, and being able to purchase and source goods at perhaps a lot less than what we get from North America and some of those countries, as well as exporting some of the goods that and services that are in demand. So I just wanted to sort of affirm the point that he made, because I think it's very important that as the Caribbean persons or descendants of Africa, we do acknowledge, and in our official capacity in government, stand up and say so. So I was very pleased to hear this, and I hope that this brings tremendous opportunity for us as a country.
Senators, the question is that the agreement for the establishment of a partnership between member states of the Caribbean Community and the African Export-Import Bank Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to provide for giving legal effect to the provisions of the agreement for the establishment of a partnership between member states of the Caribbean Community and the African Export-Import Bank.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Agreement to have the force of law.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 4.
Implementation of amendments to the agreement.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 5.
Regulations.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Schedule.
The member states of the Caribbean Community and the African Export-Import Bank.
Schedule.
Aye.
Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the agreement for the establishment of a partnership between member states of the Caribbean Community and the African Export-Import Bank Bill went through committee stage without amendments to clauses. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the agreement for the establishment of a partnership between member states of the Caribbean Community and the African Export-Import Bank Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the agreement for the establishment of a partnership between member states of the Caribbean Community and the African Export-Import Bank.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that this Senate do stand adjourned, sign it there.
Senators, The question is that this House do stand adjourned sine die. I now put the question. As many of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. But just before we conclude, Senators, I want to thank Senator Wilson for your contribution here today, and to remind Senators that we are still celebrating Nobel Laureate Month, and I encourage you to take an opportunity to join the celebration however you can. This House sitting is adjourned sine die.
Eh bien, nous venons au bout de session Sénat là aujourd'hui avec, comme on te dit en commencement, l'année à trois membres Sénat là qui parlent présent aujourd'hui. La tenue, ça c'est Yann Asso, ça qui est indépendant, ça c'est sénateur Aziz, il parle présent, sénateur Alison Jean, il parle présent et puisqu'il il y a la peine, il y a l'autre pays pour tirer papaye, avec aussi le sénateur Terrapolis, parti président aujourd'hui, mais quand même, sénateur Alison Jean était représenté par le sénateur aujourd'hui pour un petit moment, il était replacé, ça c'est le sénateur Silas Wilson qui tient position et qui fait une bonne contribution. Sénat là, il était discuté, ça fait l'hôpital Saint-Jude, oui bâtiment l'hôpital Saint-Jude qui commençait depuis 13 l'année à présent, depuis il pris du fait, là qui détruit une section en place là avec pour 13 l'année place là pour qu'on bâti après 3 différents gouvernements avec ça qui fait aujourd'hui, la motion qui présentait aujourd'hui, c'était pour discuter exactement qui situation, avec aussi pour prendre une décision pour rebâtir l'hôpital ça la plus vite que possible, comme le gouvernement ça l'a fait, et aussi pour demander pour pardon et excuse pour ces travailleurs, et faire apologie pour ces travailleurs, l'hôpital Saint-Jude qui a opéré en stade George Odlum à présent, avec la dernière discussion comme on dit, c'est différents sénateurs, avec qui était très intéressant. Il est venu au bout à présent, avec, et puis ça, nous avons passé pour studio nous, NTN. Merci un peu.